Well, once again, I'm back here trying to give a little history of VF 143. And this series is primarily about Harley Hall. Harley Hall was the CO for 3 years of the Navy Flight Demonstration Team, Blue Angels. He reported aboard 143 after I'd already been in 143 for 3 years, and we were deployed on the USS America, or Enterprise rather, which was the first nuclear carrier. We deployed to Southeast Asia, and we're in the midst of the bombing area and stuff over there. And 5 hours before the ceasefire, 1973, Harley flew the last mission, which I'll get through later, and was shot down. I'll back up here, and you'll have to forgive me. I had raw notes here, and I had smoothed them all out, and unfortunately I lost a copy of that, so I'm scanning through the raw notes at times, and some of the story will be mixed up a little bit. I have to start with my position in the squadron. I was a lieutenant then. I'd been a lieutenant for almost 2 years. And when I joined the squadron, they made me what they called the Maintenance Materiel Control Officer. And that is a position just below the department head, who is the maintenance officer. And in that position, my function was to listen to the briefings in the ready room of the pilots, try to choose and give an alignment of which pilots would go to which aircraft to the duty officer, and then the ops officer would approve that listing, and the pilots would continue the brief, and when it was time to commence flight ops, they would report to the airplanes. When they returned and came back to the ready room, first on the flight deck, they would be met by the maintenance chief. I had been a maintenance chief in 2 different squadrons for a period of almost 5 years. So when I got commissioned, I stepped up as an officer to the Maintenance Materiel Control position, and the job was to manage the maintenance chief, debrief with the pilots in the ready room, confer with the maintenance chief, and then figure out what we were going to do to repair the aircraft. And the other functions, as I might have mentioned in the previous discussions, were not like the Air Force, where an officer has one job that he masters. In the Navy, we have a limited amount of space, and every pilot may have 2 or 3 jobs in addition to being the pilot and flying missions. It's the same with the Maintenance Materiel Control Officer. A side function of that is to ensure all of the shipment to and from the ship to shore establishing and ensuring that the enlisted transportation is all set up, ordering the various trucks and the number of vehicles needed. I go to the ship a week before the squadron deploys, and I arrange for all of the equipment to be brought aboard. And the same when we come back, I don't leave the ship till almost a week after we return to make sure all the equipment is removed and everything. And then I go back to the shore base, and I have to set up the hangar facilities and things like that. Another side job is monitoring the enlisted troopers to see when their tours are up, what their training has been, their specialty and stuff, and ensure that they're cross-trained in 2 or 3 other jobs, and to make sure that if for some reason they have a hardship and they have to go home early, that I have some replacement that can perform that function. So the maintenance materiel control guys, officers, are also more junior officers in relation to all the pilots and seniority. So we get at times, if we don't have a youngster junior to us, we become the coffee mess boy. So, but now let's get back to Harley Hall. Harley was what I would call, he was a great looking guy. He was a tremendous leader. He had the personality that anybody that met him and knew him for a very short time knew that he was going to be an admiral someday. He was just the kind of guy that you wanted to be next to. You could trust him to take care of you. It was a real tragedy when we lost him. And it was more of a tragedy to the Navy to lose him. He had special qualifications and had been through special training and stuff that would have been very, very valuable to the Russians and the North Vietnamese. And that's one of the reasons why we feel that he was still alive. And I'll get into it later. All the way up to 1992 and 96, there were still indications that he might have been alive at that time frame. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. Let's get back. We're out there. The ceasefire agreements are being run in Paris. We got a stand-down order to stop the bombing, and we could still bomb if there was a battle going on and they needed support. But we could not bomb North Vietnam. We could only bomb in South Vietnam. The peace accords went on for, I believe, 3.5, almost 4 years. And everybody was contesting the Vietnamese War. Senator Kerry was in the military. He went to Vietnam. He was there for a very short time. He got a flesh wound, and at that time the said if you were wounded twice in Vietnam, you could request to go home. Kerry threw a hand grenade, and he didn't throw it far enough, and that hand grenade fragments hit him in the wrist, and that was his second Purple Heart, and he went home, and he joined Jane Fonda and the anti-war rallies, and eventually went for political party and the Democrat, and worked his way on up. And I forget exactly what year, and this was well after Vietnam was over, when there was political pressure put on and politics to find the missing POWs. When the war ended, they had a list of over 2,000 POWs, known POWs, that were handed over or captured or whatever to the North Vietnamese. Only, I believe, 645, I may be wrong on the exact number, were actually registered by the North Vietnamese as being prisoners. They denied knowledge of the rest of them. In order to get the peace negotiation moving and trying to end the war, they had to give various concessions, and they had to accept that number. And eventually, pressure was put on I'm trying to remember the president's name now, Richard Nixon, and Congress voted to declare the war officially ended, and they cut all funding for all research and everything to continue looking for POWs. Prior to that, Colin Powell had a lot of pressure. He was the State Department, and he had a lot of pressure, and he forced a committee to be brought to investigate the POW situation. That pressure was created by military wives that wrote their congressmen and stuff and requested that a committee be put together. Harley Hall's wife went to testify before Congress, and she wrote a book and sent hundreds of letters demanding to see all of the congressional information on captured POWs. And when she was trying to testify in Congress, if you've read her book, John Kerry told her to shut up and sit down and cut her off.